Welcome and good evening. Tonight I have a few creepy ghost stories for you to listen to. Let me know how many of you are skeptics or believe in the paranormal unknown. With that said, let's begin. My wife and I moved into our old house in New England in summer 2000. We had looked at dozens of houses, but this one just immediately felt like home. Soon after, we invited our good friend James and his husband up for a weekend. Keep James and his husband in mind. We were pretty well into getting our late night party on, playing cards, drinking, smoking in the dining room. Out the corner of my eye I saw, though the experience was more like perceived, very vividly an older woman with jet black hair sitting next to the old upright piano in the corner. The piano came with the house. We specifically requested that the previous owner include it in the sale because it was so cool, and we didn't have much furniture. It wasn't even slightly scary. In fact, it was just like she was hanging out. I mentioned it to everyone and we laughed it off. Drinking and fun continued through the night. I was never really a ghost believer and still a skeptic 100%, but the rest of this story makes me really wonder. Several weeks later, we met a neighbour from down the street who lived in the neighbourhood for 45 years. "You live in the Muriel King house," she tells us. Muriel was a really interesting lady. She was a famous fashion designer in the 1930s, please Google her, that lived there alone after her husband committed suicide. Very tragic, but she was an interesting lady. Very independent and ahead of her time. She travelled all over the world. She was Greek, I think. Greek, I ask? Weird question, but did she have black hair? Yes, she had jet black hair even when she was an older woman. It was very striking. Yup, I got the chills right then. Many weeks later, I met another neighbour from down the street that had lived there for 60 plus years, and he starts telling me about Muriel. She was a famous fashion designer. She designed gowns for Rita Hayworth and all the classic film stars. And she designed costumes for Broadway plays too. Her parties were legendary, he tells me. She used to have all her gay boyfriends from Broadway come up on the train and they'd drink and sing show tunes at the piano in the dining room all night long. Yup, now this could all be coincidental, but now I'm having my doubts. But she must have been an awesome woman. People from around town have given us some of her original drawings and even unfinished dress she was working on. There haven't been any more Muriel sightings, but shortly after my wife got pregnant 20 years ago, we both woke up out of a cold sleep at the same time and looked at each other like, what the fuck? And then our bedroom door slammed hard. We like to think that Muriel wasn't a fan of kids. She had never had any of her own, so she was like, later, I'm out of here. In 2020, at the beginning of COVID, I had just given birth. At this time, I could only have one other person in the room with me my entire stay at the hospital. Of course, my kid's father was there, but like the third day he left to clean up our house and get everything prepared for me and the baby. I had gotten sick and had a C-section, so I had to stay for about 4 to 5 days. Well, while he was away, a nurse named Kelly said she would be helping me throughout the day and spending time with me so I didn't feel lonely while Dad is gone. I couldn't really hold my baby due to being sick and the pain from the C-section, so my nurses would come in every time it was time to feed. I noticed when they came in, they wouldn't acknowledge Kelly and she would go to the farthest part of the room and she would tell me, "I'm just going to get out of the way." Now, she did tell me that she didn't specialise in what they did, she was just for comfort, so I didn't question anything. The entire day she was so helpful and encouraging to me. I really believe I would have broken down if she wasn't in there with me. She was such a sweetheart. Well, after about 5 or 6 hours, she told me she had to leave and that she would come visit me before her shift was over to see how I was doing. She hugged me and blew a kiss at my baby and walked out of the room. Later that night, Dad came back and he was very upset. He had told me some stuff happened with his mum and that he was sorry he took so long. I was upset, but I told him a nurse named Kelly kept me company. And as I'm telling him about her, my nurse is changing my sheets and she's like, "Who's Kelly?" I explained and she said that nobody named Kelly was in the room or working that day. So I instantly thought about those women who would pretend to be nurses and kidnap children. But my nurse told me that I may be hallucinating and she told the doctor. I talked to my doctor and he said the same thing. Well, a couple of hours later, a nurse that I didn't recognise came in my room and said, "I know this might sound crazy, but everyone on the floor is talking about you seeing Kelly." I said, "Yeah, she was there with me for like 7 hours today. She helped out a lot." We were smiling and laughing while I was telling her about Kelly and how sweet and funny she was. Then she pulled up her phone and showed me pictures of her and Kelly that looked like to be maybe early 2000s. I was smiling knowing that I wasn't hallucinating. Then she sat down and told me Kelly died over 10 years ago from a domestic violence with her boyfriend. I wasn't too shocked because my entire life I've been dealing with paranormal. But I got chills because I never had an encounter this deep. Well, the lady gave me a hug and started crying, saying, "Now I know that she is okay." Since that day, I've been wondering why did Kelly come in my room and help me. I kinda wish I could see her again. I wouldn't consider myself a very spiritual person, but I have no explanation for what I encountered on my family's property and was hoping someone had an answer as to whether or not this was some kind of spirit or entity. My family has around 360 acres in North Oklahoma that has been in our family since the land rush. Growing up, the family would meet there for Thanksgiving and Christmas, but as the family expanded, it was quickly outgrown. Nowadays, I'm about the only person that goes there, and I go and went there regularly to train with my firearms. I went there earlier this year and had an experience that shook me so badly that I haven't spoken about it until recently, and will never go back there alone. I arrived around 2 PM and set up my targets, but something fell off. I use an electronic headset for hearing protection that also amplifies ambient noise, and I noticed that everything seemed to stop. No wind, no bugs, no birds, nothing. Just complete and total silence, which is very unusual for the area. I run my normal drills, and as the sun starts to set, things get stranger. Odd smells, like a dirty litter box and body odour, started coming around, and I noticed that the coyotes were crossing the field west of me, almost as if they were intentionally avoiding entering the woods nearby. Then I started hearing interference coming over my headset, and what sounded like disembodied voices speaking in a language I couldn't understand. Now I'm starting to worry. I start gathering my things and I hear what sounds like a woman's blood-curdling screams coming from the woods. Around the same time, I got what I can only describe as nauseating feeling of being watched. Shortly followed by very distinct footsteps trudging through the foliage in the tree line approximately 30 yards from my position. I've been an avid hunter since childhood, familiar with noises of the woods, and the cadence of the footsteps indicated a large bipedal creature, oddly human-like. I pull my phone out to take a video and I start scanning the tree line with my flashlight. Standing behind a tree at the edge of the tree line was a tall black silhouette with spindly limbs and a pale face, looking directly at me. I managed to capture a great still image of it from the video that I will try to find and attach. I quickly grabbed my range bag and made a run towards my truck. I get about 50 yards from the truck, and the light post on our property that's hooked up to the county power has never turned off in the 20 years I've been there, suddenly cuts off. Now I'm blindly running in the direction I believe my truck is in while I hit the unlock button on my fob to find the lights. I get in my truck, speed off, and as I'm watching the rear view, the light post turns back on. I apologise for the long post, but I'm finally ready to get this out in the open for interpretation. I tend to think of myself as a rational person that doesn't necessarily believe in the woo kind of stuff. Although my mother described me as being sensitive and somewhat gravitated towards energies as a child. I was doing everything I could to rationalise or come up with a reasonable explanation for things I was experiencing, but I have no explanation. The kind of fear this experience put into me is and was unlike any kind of fear I've ever felt. I want to thank you all for listening and I hope to catch you all in the next one. Thank you.